Moving on to pitching. You're ready to raise money and it's time to find and talk to investors to convince them to invest in you. There's a lot of superstition around pitching and there's a lot of advice out in the world about pitching. And so, what I want to focus on are some of the non obvious truths about pitching that might help you orient yourself as you go through the process. Pitching at a high level is simply really good storytelling and sales. All of the superstitious mythology around the things that you have to do a good pitch boil down to these two things. What do I mean by this? To successfully raise money, you need to understand your investors as if they were customers that you were selling to. So you really need to understand your investor base, and you need to be able to find the investors that are interested in what you're selling. This is a mistake that a lot of people make, is that they try to raise money from investors who are not great customers because they were never interested in the product that they're selling in the first place. So if you're an early stage company, for example, it doesn't make sense for you to try to raise money from a late stage venture capital firm that can't take too much risk. Or if you're raising millions and millions of dollars, it doesn't make sense for you to talk to small angel investors that are going to be writing $5,000 to $10,000 checks. So you need to find investors that are interested in what you are selling. This applies to the industry you're in. Some investors are only interested in particular industries. For example, you might be building a health tech product. You don't want to be selling to enterprise software investors. Or, you might even be selling to the wrong category of investors, period. Some investors like to invest in things like bars and real estate, and they don't touch technology. Pitching to those people is not a good use of your time because you're selling to a customer who doesn't want what you're selling. So find investors who are interested in what you're selling. That will make the process a lot easier for you because you're doing good sales at that point. You're selling a product to somebody who wants it. And then finally, you need to tell a good story. You need to convince the investor that this thing that they want, which is an investment in you, is perfect for them, and they should invest in you at the terms that are beneficial to you as the entrepreneur. So how do you tell a good story? Ultimately, investors care about one thing, which is that they need to make money. This is especially true of funds who need to generate a return for their investors, but it's also true for angels. Angels might have different interests that might help push them into investing. So for example, maybe they're really driven to achieve a certain mission in healthcare, or maybe they like you as an entrepreneur. But ultimately, investors are looking to make money. So you need to explain to your investor, you need to tell a compelling and convincing story about how you are going to do that for them. This is going to vary widely based on the type of investor you're pitching to and the stage that you are at. So if you are an early stage company and you haven't built anything yet, or you're in the process of developing your first product, maybe your focus is going to be on how you're building a great team that's going to have what it takes in order to succeed. Maybe your product is out to market and you're already selling it to people. Maybe the pitch is based around your superior product. Or maybe if you're a little bit later stage, you've got a product developed and it's now an issue of growing, you're going to talk about how you have superior marketing ability, superior ability to distribute your product to the market. Maybe it's all three. It really depends on, again, the investor and the stage you're at, but you need to figure out what they care about, what they think is important for making money, and then build a story around that. Which leads me to a very important point, which is that there is no formula for pitching. There's no formula for the structure of the pitch. There's no formula for the content of the pitch. You, as the entrepreneur, need to figure out what the pitch is for each type of person that you are pitching to, and again, the stage that you're pitching at. So if you go to the internet or if you go to your general small business advisors, you might come across some advice that says that there's a specific structure for your pitch deck that you need to follow. You need to have these 10 slides in your pitch deck, or you need to include a 20-year projection on your finances. Those are all simply templates, and you can use them to help you guide your pitch process, but having those components isn't necessary. You might not need a lot of those things when you're raising money. So for example, long-term financial projections might not be necessary for early stage investors who understand that you're too early for long-term financial projections. They're also not sufficient. Having all of those things isn't necessarily going to lead to you successfully pitching an investor. You need to do the work to understand what the elements are that people are interested in and looking for at each stage, and build your pitch based on that. And this is a helpful thing to understand because the standards and norms around pitching vary dramatically by stage, they vary dramatically by region, and they vary dramatically year to year depending on how the economy is going. So learning the sales process, learning how to understand your investor as a customer is a lot more valuable than simply going based on a formula for a pitch deck. Which gets me to my next point, which is that fundraising is an open market transaction. As much mythology as there is around fundraising, as much excitement and interest as there is around fundraising on TV and in pop culture, really fundraising is no different than used car sales. Used car sales, the process of buying or selling a used car, is all based on market dynamics. Are you selling a rare car in a competitive market? You're going to get a great price. Are you selling a common car, a used car that's beat up on a market where those cars are readily available? You're not going to get a good price for that car. That same principle applies to your fundraising process. How successful you are depends on what's going on in the market and the market that you're in, and your ability to sell and negotiate with investors. The implication of this is that scarcity is incredibly powerful in the fundraising world. And that's on both sides of the transaction. If there are a lot of investors and not very many great companies, then the companies have all the leverage, and it's a lot easier for companies to raise from investors on the terms that they want. If there are a lot of companies and there are not a lot of investors, then the investors have all the leverage, and it becomes a lot more difficult for companies to raise because the investors get to be a lot more picky about which companies they choose. These dynamics around scarcity also vary by geography, by market, so depending on the type of company you're building, and over time. We go through periods where there's not a lot of readily available venture capital. We go through periods where there's a ton of readily available venture capital. And understanding that scarcity can help you by helping you understand that sometimes it's not about how much progress your company has made. Sometimes it's really just a function of what's going on in the market. You can use this to your advantage, however. If scarcity helps drive up prices, if scarcity helps drive interest, you can work to make your company a scarce asset. You can work to make your company something that a lot of investors want and that they will pay more for by doing a handful of things. The first and most important thing is to make progress in building your company. The more progress you've made, the more attractive your company will be to a wider set of investors, which means that it will be a scarcer asset. Another thing is to build a broad pool of interest from investors from all across the country or even the world if you can, in order to create some of that scarcity for yourself. If you limit yourself to raising from your local market, let's say it's a city or a state, you might not have the same success as if you try to build a network of investors all across the country. The more investors you talk to, the more likely you are to get somebody who's interested, and the more interested people you have, the better you'll be able to do in your fundraising process. So work really hard to build your company, work really hard to make progress to make yourself attractive to investors, but at the same time, understand that if you don't have enough investors interested in you at the same time, raising money is going to be very difficult. So work on building that interest as well. One last thing that's worth mentioning is that money is not permission. If you fail to raise money, you should be working really hard to build your company anyway. A lot of people, when they go out and pitch, they might fail the first time. Raising money is very difficult. And they give up or they stop making progress because they say, well, I need money in order to move forward, and they'll just wait until they can raise money. The truth is that investors hate this. Investors want to see that you can go out and figure something out. You can keep building your business even without money. The reason investors like to see this is because it shows that you're dedicated to building your business. It shows that you're resourceful and you can make progress even when you're limited by resources. And it shows that when they do give you money, if they invest, you're going to keep pushing on things even when they get hard. One of the worst things you can do if you've failed to fundraise is to do nothing. The best thing you can do for yourself is to keep pushing on every avenue available to you. Sometimes you need money to pay people. Sometimes you need money to buy supplies. I'm not taking away from that. It's very important as a resource. But there's almost always something you can do, especially in the early stages, to keep creating progress for yourself and to keep pushing your company forward even without the money. Maybe it's continuing to prototype on your product. Maybe it's building a customer list. Even if you don't have your product ready, you have a list of willing and able customers, people who are interested in buying your product whenever it's ready. Maybe it's building an audience. Maybe it's building a website and getting great search traffic of people who will eventually buy your product. Whatever it is, just keep pushing forward. And the next time you go out to raise money, you're going to be in a lot better position to gather that interest from investors.